Hello, welcome back. I'm Catzilla and this is where I talk about horror and all things horrifying to save my friends from my constant info dumping. Remember that one watch equals one free friend. Today I'm gonna be getting real specific, gonna be getting into the nitty gritty, the darkest corners of my brain and singling out the precise scenes that have affected me the most along my sort of horror movie watching journey. Namely, the scenes that affected me in the way that they horrified me. They absolutely scarred me for life. The scenes in movies that crept beyond the confines of the TV screen like Sadako from The Ring and wormed their way into my psyche forever. Which, you know, I assume for a horror filmmaker is kind of the ultimate goal. Although plenty of the films I'm going to be talking about today are not actually horror. So I've got a list of 20 in ascending order of scariness, but with a little twist. I have always argued that being disturbed by a piece of media just means way too many things for one simple definition, as have many prominent writers and figures in the horror genre since pretty much the genre was birthed. The concept of horror versus terror dates all the way back to the 1800s, first discussed by the Gothic novelist Anne Radcliffe, although me personally, I remember first hearing about it from Stephen King in his 1981 kind of non-fiction essay style book, Danse Macabre. It's all sort of reflecting on horror as a genre. In that he proposes revulsion as a third category in the horror versus terror dichotomy, so horror versus terror versus revulsion. So according to him, all the ways a piece of art can disturb you are terror, truly spine-tingling, psychologically screwy type fear. Horror, shock and distress. You really desperately want to cover your eyes. You've maybe just seen finally the monster that's been terrorizing your nightmares face to face for the first time and it's hideous. And finally, revulsion, just plain old gross out factor. I've split my list of 20 for today into two groups, one for horror and one for terror. I think the more revulsion type stuff that Stephen King talks about, I think I discuss that more in my horror tropes video. I talk about lots of scenes of like eye trauma and teeth getting ripped out and all the gross out stuff in that one. My terror section is gonna consist of scenes that just made me really want to go to sleep with the light on, the spookiest shit I've ever witnessed, and my horror list is just gonna be like the scenes that like just genuinely just upset and repelled me the most. Not claiming that either is better than the other at all. I adore movies in both of these sections. But when you make a video about stuff that's just spooky, there's always gonna be people like, there's nothing disturbing here. And then when you make a video that's just about disturbing stuff, people are gonna be like, there's nothing genuinely creepy here, you know? Also, I think it's just very fun to compare and contrast the two. So all that being said, let's get into it. So I'm going to start with terror rather than horror, the spooky shit as opposed to the disturbing. So make sure you turn your lights out and we are going to be counting from least spooky to most spooky, just as a reminder. Our first terrifying scene comes from Sam Raimi's low-budget masterpiece, Evil Dead 1981. Just generally one of my all-time faves. I'm not a big franchise head in general. I can't really deal with movies that have like 8,000 installments like Halloween and Friday the 13th, but this is one where I just honestly really like all of them. This first movie, of course, is about a group of 5 youngins staying at a cabin in the wooded buttfuck of nowhere. They find a bunch of freaky occult looking shit in the basement, including some audio tapes which feature like demonic incantations. Once played, it wakes up the local demons which start possessing members of the group and causing the splatteriest, slimiest carnage imaginable. The only man left standing unpossessed in the end is our hero, Ash. The scene I'm specifically talking about here comes after the character of Cheryl has already been possessed. That's Ash's sister. Shelley is too, Scott is dead, and Linda, Ash's girlfriend, has been newly turned into a deadite. That is a demonically possessed zombie adjacent diva in this franchise. The scene comes when Linda is sitting on the floor and giggling at Ash, looking newly horrifying in her deadite-ificated form, and singing
gonna get you, not another peep. Kinda gonna sleep. We
It sticks out so much as like a moment of genuine menace in this film, which can be very slapstick and gory psychologically, because when you put yourself in Ash's shoes, that's someone he loves and trusts very much, and she'd been kind of the last human left with him. And then just in a straight up fucking freaky way, with the effect on her voice literally making her sound like a discordant evil music box with actual music box soundtrack in the background. She sounds kind of like 8 little voices screeching at once. So all white eyes. I remember reading how like horribly painful those contacts were for the actress, alongside just how genuinely chaotic the shoot was. They were working actually out of a cabin with no running water, apart from that of a coffee machine. So I'm just kind of thinking about that the whole time, feeling her pain. The way she keeps on giggling and squealing and acting like a happy little baby, even when Ash grabs her and drags her across the floor, is just a very uncanny valley and chilling moment for sure. Amazing performance from Betsy Baker. Always catches me off guard when I'm having Evil Dead fun. My next scene is a very little one, and it requires a little bit of context too. I can only give you so much context here because it comes from David Lynch's super surreal and dark mystery series Twin Peaks. And if you know anything about Twin Peaks, you will know that there is so much lore, so much backstory just packed into its 3 seasons and movie. The main things you'll need to understand is it follows the various eccentric and oftentimes shady residents of Twin Peaks, Washington, after the death of Laura Palmer, a pretty high school girl who everyone claims to have liked, but nobody seems to have really known. We spend the show trying to get to the bottom of who killed her and the context of it, how it all went down. Twin Peaks is, however, a pretty creepy place. Strange things are definitely afoot there. The owls are not what they seem, as one might say. A lot of that creep factor is kind of condensed into the character of Bob. And I'll be very careful what I say here because so many spoilers are sort of baked into Bob's existence or non-existence. We learn of him like tangentially pretty early, as he'll often ominously appear in the dreams and visions and such of various characters, namely Dale Cooper, who is thus convinced Bob's the one who killed Laura Palmer and starts researching him. I'll let you watch the show and enjoy drinking in the horrible, eerie mystery that is Bob, but I will say he is someone or something that commits horrible acts like murder and rape. He's basically a major force of evil and wrongness in the story. So immediately quite a scary guy. Any scene with him can get weird, often appearing in like overexposed lighting and jerky shots and hovering behind people in mirrors and such. The specific scene I've elected to put here comes in season 2, episode 2, and it's his appearance in the one particular vision had by the character of Maddie. She is Laura Palmer's cousin, played by the same actress. They look comically alike. After having a little sing-song with her buddies in the Palmer house living room, she sees, in a sequence that's often referred to now as the Bob crawl, he appears in the distance just behind the sofa, locks eyes with her, and slowly starts to approach with a maniacal grin on his face. There's minimal cuts away from his crawl, apart from like showing Maddie's horrified reaction, and it keeps rolling until he is literally pressing right up to the screen and snarling at your face. You can basically smell him. It's just a deeply unnerving setup in the classic David Lynch sense, the dreamlike surreality of it all, the unflinchingness of the camera lingering way longer than you expect or want it to. Frank Silva is so perfectly menacing in this part too. He was literally just like a set dresser for Twin Peaks that was accidentally caught in a reflection shot at one point, and David Lynch liked the spookiness of that so much that he kept it in and he formed the whole character of Bob around Silva. It's as if Bob really did just like manifest in the show. Very uncanny, as a lot of the moments on the terror list are. I love it. Number 8 comes from When Evil Lurks, or Cuando Acecha la Maldad, a 2023 kind of demon-y, slightly zombie-ish hybrid horror movie. It's funny, I'm pretty lukewarm on this film as a whole, but that's mostly because certain scenes in it are so jarring and so brain imprinting, and like I feel like the main kind of plot and wrap up of it all kind of pales in comparison. It never really lives up to all of that. Kind of like eating a delicious sandwich with juicy farm fresh French brie. But then the bread is like kind of soggy, you know? But yeah, when it comes to individual scares and set pieces, I could take my pick with When Evil Lurks. I'm sure a lot of people are expecting the dog scene. It's where a whopping great Bordeaux Mastiff goes feral and attacks a little girl, just whipping her around by her head like a rag doll. Insane. But remember, we're still in the terror section here. We're still looking at skin crawly, uneasy horror right now. So I've gone with the scene at the beginning, introducing the character of Uriel and the whole kind of sequence following that with trying to transport him and stuff. Handy too, because it sets up like so much of the movie's lore. So let me just run you down real quick. When Evil Lurks takes place in a world where demonic possession is like a known phenomenon and it's highly infectious. Uriel is one of those infected, known in universe as a rotten. And rotten is a very accurate name for it because it really does make you look like a rotten, bloated corpse. The look of this motherfucker is exactly what earns this scene's place on the ranking. It's some of the most hideous like creature, or I guess just body horror victim design I've witnessed. He's all tumescent and gummy and he just lays there blankly because he's so overrun with demonic forces he's practically dead. It makes sense seeing as this is the director of Terrified, which also gave me nightmares with its similar design on the reanimated little boy corpse, who also barely moves when the camera is focused on him. That's very much part of the menace with these characters. Because possession is like an accepted thing in this world, they try to call for an exorcist, but when they can't get one, they decide they're just gonna try and slop him out of his bed and pop him in the back of their truck and just drive out, dump him somewhere in the middle of nowhere so they don't have to deal with the demon infection anymore. Things get even more horrifying when by the time they're satisfied, they're far enough from civilization and pull up to dump Uriel, his body is just nowhere to be seen. Meaning he either just like fell out of the boot unnoticed, or even worse, somehow gained the ability to move the second we and the characters took our eyes off of him. Again, similar to the boy in Terrified, who will only ever move unseen. In the greater context of the film, this is what like starts off a major demon pandemic, starts everyone getting possessed. But even just isolated on its own, it is terrifying. Number 7 belongs to the criminally underrated horror TV show Channel Zero. So sorry, a battery just exploded behind me and I thought this was about to become one of those like hidden horrors on YouTube videos. Yeah, I feel like there is a lot of absolute nightmare fuel out there that gets missed or kind of undersold because it's in a TV show rather than a movie. TV and like short films are seriously overlooked pieces of horror media and I love them both. I could easily do a video on either of those. But yeah, my leading example for all of that would be Channel Zero. It's an anthology series where each individual season is based on a different creepypasta, which is like an internet-based urban legend, basically. It's any creepy story that originates on some 4chan message board or Reddit or such like, and was usually originally presented as like a true story to freak people out. So for example, season 1 is about Candle Cove, a fucked up hallucinatory kids show that only a few people seem to remember. Season 2 is the No End House, the scariest haunted house attraction ever that spits you out in an alternate universe. Season 3 is Butcher's Block, cannibals, just cannibals. And also some forest stairs, random staircases to nowhere that appear in the woods. It's pretty much a creepypasta staple. Season 4 is my personal favorite. It's The Dream Door, about a woman who randomly finds a new door in her house and there's something terrible from her childhood inside of it. Naturally, there are a gazillion scenes to choose from here, many genuinely spine-tingling moments. I was at first gonna pick one from season 1, Candle Cove, featuring the Tooth Child. That is the monstrous being behind the Candle Cove TV show. Covered in teeth he's harvested from the kids he's killed, but that's more like everything about him and his design is what's frightening there, as opposed to any one particular scene. And he only ever appears really fleetingly anyways. So instead I've gone with Pretzel Jack's first kill from season 4 the dream door. He also has a lot of really scary, like fleeting glimpse type appearances. He is the horrific imaginary friend that lurks behind the aforementioned tin door. So there's a lot of moments burned into my brain where he's like peeking through cracks in walls and around corners in the background. But I've picked this one specific sequence because I feel like it showcases so perfectly just what makes him scary. So the character of Jillian is the one that lives in the house wherein the door is found. Pretzel Jack was her imaginary friend as a little girl who is now back on the scene and ready to defend her honor. That is his whole function as an entity, to protect Jillian, whether Jillian wants protecting at that moment or not. We've got a scene of her arguing with Jason, who is her husband's best friend, because she's been having suspicions her husband is cheating on her and she's trying to ask Jason for answers, but he's being very avoidant, very defensive about it. Unbeknownst to him though, Pretzel Jack is coming for him in the back of the shot, emerging in a doorway only the audience can just about see. Immediately horrifying, you can only make out his like misshapen, strange body barely in the darkness. He's a contortionist, so he moves in a very distinctive way and it looks extra menacing when it's just slightly obscured by shadows. You know something terrible is about to happen, the characters do not. You're just waiting in horrified suspense. Then once Pretzel Jack actually pops off and slaughters Jason, the uncanny contortionist vibes get ever stronger, more uncomfortable. He really brutally stabs him and then does this celebratory little yippee thing. He starts doing little flips and tricks and shit. Any scene with him kind of follows this formula. We know he's coming whenever someone's pissing Jillian off. We're just looking in all the corners, waiting for him to burst out. He shows up looking hideous, kills really violently, then acts like the happiest, kiddiest little clown afterwards to try and make Jillian smile while she's just like screaming in unbridled horror. More people need to share in this trauma with me. He's such a unique and nauseatingly freaky looking character. Love that guy. Next up is the house tour scene from Lorcan Finnegan's Vivarium. I will always ride for this film so fucking hard. I think it's utterly miserable in the best way, terrifying on a truly existential level. This is the epitome of terror as opposed to horror, in my opinion. It's about a young couple looking to move out and kind of start their life together, only to get lured to and trapped in the evil cosmic horror new build development. Once they reach the neighborhood of Yonder to take a look around and quickly discover it is really depressing and they certainly do not want to live there, they can never get out again. They're stuck living in this empty grey show home, a clear allegory for anxiety around the suburbs and settling down. And this is amplified when a mysterious baby is dropped at their door a few days later with the instruction to raise him and be released. The main horror draw of this movie is its monotony. The every day and place and thing melts into just one dull nightmare for the characters. One sequence that stands out to me, that breaks out of the grey haze, is the sequence in which the characters realize they're trapped for the first time. So they're shown around a house in Yonder by this very strange little real estate agent, and there's already some uncomfortable moments there where he doesn't act quite right, acting oddly pressury towards the childless couple when showing them a kid's room in the house, sometimes copying them after they say stuff.
Do you have children?
No, and not yet.
No, not yet.
He's generally just kind of a fucking freak. What really gets the characters and me spiraling though is when the couple try to leave afterwards, driving around this horrifically uncanny little dollhouse looking estate as the sky gets darker and they get more and more confused. Those are my pals out there who have listened to the Magnus Archives. This is kind of the same thing as the episode Cul-de-sac, and that's one of my favorites, the ones I'm most afraid of, for a reason. Stuff dealing with like infinity, especially situations like this where characters kind of stumble upon an infinity and infinite loop without meaning to, they really get to me. I think because the whole point is that it's beyond human comprehension, so my brain naturally starts breaking. Also, as a guy that is always extremely excited to go home, just the mere fact that they can't go home devastates me. Like, how are they gonna get cozy? How are they gonna put their PJs on, you know? If they're stuck in this shithole forever. It's so lonely too. It's completely isolated. There's not another soul for miles and miles. Well, for anywhere. There is no other souls in this realm. And with the added context of the rest of the movie, we know there never will be again. Unless you count the kid they're given, but I do not think his ass has a soul, to be honest. Yeah, this is a real mixture of just like abject terror and sinking sadness that will always stick with me. Another seriously underrated piece of horror due to its TV format is the Netflix show Marianne 2019. It's also French, so it's just like destined to not be seen and appreciated by the masses, but it's got everything. It's got everything. It's about a horror writer, Emma, who's made a career off of writing about the ancient demonic witch that haunted her nightmares as a kid, Marianne. Of course, Marianne is real and is rather pissed off when Emma decides to stop writing about her. There's some fantastic performances here, especially Mireille Obstmeyer, I think I'm pronouncing that right, as Madame d'Ogeron, a woman possessed by Marianne for a period of time. I cannot express how much this woman frightens me. She is such a little freak. And I mean that entirely as a compliment. She does amazing. Scariest scene I'm talking about here comes at the beginning of episode 2. I remember having a very like profound effect on me the first time I saw it. It's where the character of Camille, Emma's assistant and friend, wakes up in the night to the burglar alarm going off. And she gets a call from the alarm people, checking everything's okay. There's already been a couple of freaky things going on that Camille has witnessed at this point. It's episode 2, so she's incredibly paranoid right off the bat. It's shot in this really paranoia-inducing way too. It's focusing on a lot of the long dark hallways of the house around her, following her eyeline as she peeks into dark, shadowy corners. It really captures that feeling of like creeping around your house in the dark at night for like a glass of water incredibly well. Things get even more sinister when the voice on the phone starts saying ever so slightly ominous things. For example, the operator tells her to go close the back door to be safe, and then afterwards just tells her to turn around because you never know if someone might be hiding in your house. And we're furtively scanning the dark, empty living room along with Camille as the operator starts saying, "I'm right here in the corner. Can you see me?" And who should be in the corner, just barely visible, standing and smiling without a care in the world, but Madame d'Ogeron, that spooky bitch. Such a simple but super, super creative, super effective little scare, of which this show has tons. So please go watch it. Yeah, I think about that diva in the corner so often. It's like I can see her right now. Spot 4 goes to Joel Anderson's Lake Mungo, a real heavy hitter in the found footage mockumentary genre. This is a very quiet, gentle little scare of a movie. And I don't mean that as to say like it's not very scary, just that it's very scary in like a creeping, subtle way. It's very much a slow burn. You can't be watching this and enjoying it while scrolling Instagram reels. It's set up as a documentary following the Palmer family after their teenage daughter Alice drowned swimming in a dam. It follows their grief as it goes into some darker, spookier territories. For example, the teenage son supposedly captures Alice's ghost on camera, and the family have all these strange nightmares, and ultimately they all learn that they never really knew Alice in life the way they thought they did. The scene that impacted me the most here comes right near the end of the movie, and it happens when they discover an old phone of Alice's that they didn't know about before that has some video footage on it. Now, earlier in the film we get some pretty nasty, jarring photos of Alice's corpse, how it looked when they found her after the dam incident. She did drown and they didn't find her body down there for like a hot minute, so her body is looking very waterlogged and rotten. Her face is all bloated. It's got black patches on it. Genuinely a horrible image that could stand on its own as the scariest moment. However, that image comes back to haunt us in an even bigger way when we delve into the footage on Alice's phone. It was taken on a school trip to Lake Mungo, where her classmates had kind of reported that she seemed quite distressed in general on that trip. It was a few months before her death. And this video was taken at a point where she'd kind of broken off from her friends and gone off for a little walk on her own. It's really crispy quality, and it's the middle of the night, which I think really adds so much creep factor here. And she's just filming the ground for a while until the camera flips up to show us an approaching figure. Very slowly approaching, just kind of wandering along, looking a little bit lost. While this is happening, we get voiceover from Alice talking to a psychic before her death about nightmares she'd been having and the heavy sense of doom that seemed to follow her in the weeks leading up to her drowning. We get the iconic quote,
I feel like something bad is gonna happen to me. I feel like something bad has happened. It hasn't reached me yet, but it's on its way.
And then the figure finally gets close enough for us to make out its face, although it is barely recognizable as a human face. It's all kind of smushed and melted. Looks like someone who's had like a severe allergic reaction. And then just as you realize what you're seeing, the film cuts back to that autopsy photo of Alice's corpse, and it really hits home that that's what she recorded. That's what she saw on the school trip that freaked her out so much. Her own doppelganger, but dead and half rotting. Insanely freaky, both as a concept and as an image. And it's a really interesting way of harkening back to like that folklore about doppelgangers in real life. You know, it's been said that if you ever meet your double in real life, you are doomed to die soon. They are a harbinger of death for you, sent to warn you. And that's exactly what Lake Mungo does with his plot in the most visceral way. We have entered the terror top 3. It's nearly time to crown the most terrifying scene and then scoot right on over to the disturbing ones. But for now, I want to talk about a very underrated little gem, Elliot Goldner's The Borderlands 2013, or Final Prayer as it's sometimes called. I think that was its like worldwide or US release title. This is another found footage banger. It's following a priest and a tech guy who rigs up all the cameras and microphones and stuff, investigating a supposedly haunted church in Devon. There is loads of absolute gold scattered through its 90-minute runtime. I watched it pretty young, so I think that probably made the scares hit especially hard. But having rewatched it as an adult, I stand by the fact there is some seriously freaky shit in here. It's pretty classic, ooky spooky, ghosty horror. You've got disembodied babies crying and local devil worshippers setting sheep on fire. But I do think on the whole it's really quite subtle, and it uses its found footage format to weave in so much creepy, blink and you'll miss it background imagery. I've talked about it on this channel before, how much I like the sequences in this where its characters are like stumbling through the woods at night and we're seeing teeny tiny glimpses of ghostly figures through the branches before the camera like kind of naturally cuts away because it's found footage. It's really clever. I think it's done so well, and there's such a palpable sense of dread in this. Dread, it's got to be my favorite horror movie emotion. Shout out to Dread by Clive Barker. It's a great short story. The scene I'm going to officially rank here, placing at number 3, is the very last scene in the movie. So very, very, very spoilery, just so you know. Not that most of these haven't been incredibly spoilery, but this is literally just the end of it's the last scene. This is just how the movie ends. It shows our 2 leads, priest and tech guy, venturing into the belly of the haunted church, and I mean quite literally the belly. They head into the church's basement after another member of their party seemingly disappears down there. This all happens during an exorcism, an attempt with some of the priesty guys to cleanse the church's grounds. Our lead characters can hear distant cries and see their disappeared priesty friend in the distance, so they keep delving further and further into the basement, even though we slowly notice it seems to be getting quite tight down there. What were already spooky, winding tunnels filled with evidence of human sacrifices and mysterious sigils everywhere become teeny tiny claustrophobic little tubes, squeezing in smaller and smaller until our characters are completely stuck in there, deep underground, unable to get out. If you, like me, are always severely rattled by real life stories of caving deaths, this is exactly like that, but with a supernatural nightmare twist. After they're good and stuck, just to make matters worse, the walls they're wedged between start to secrete a kind of acid. It's like the church is a living thing and they are being actively digested. And the movie cuts out as the acid is burning them, the walls are shrinking tighter and tighter, and they're just screaming out in agony. Got to be one of the bleakest and most harrowing endings of all time. It's really what made the movie stick for me. Next up is Damien McCarthy's Caveat, a very dour and grimy feeling little Irish horror movie. I quite like Damien McCarthy movies in general, or at least I quite like his vision. Like his most recent one, Oddity, that had some really great surreal shit in it and a really striking creature design, even if overall I was kind of blech about the finished product. Caveat is about a guy who we think may be suffering some memory loss. He's kind of a mysterious character who takes a job as basically a carer for a girl with super severe, I think, PTSD, various mental illnesses that make her go catatonic for periods of time. I say carer, but he really is just there in the house, making sure she's like still alive, because she spends all her time locked away from him in her room. And specifically because it's the only way she feels safe, the guy has to agree to wear a harness with chains that restricts him to only certain parts of the house. He physically cannot reach her bedroom because his chains are too short. Why in the fuck he'd agree to that, I do not know, but he does, and we're immersed in his insanely claustrophobic little world with the girl on this isolated, cut off from society island for the movie's runtime. Deeply lonely vibes to this film, and all of Damien McCarthy's films, I would say. The scene here that really scared me comes kind of towards the end of the film, after the main fallout of the plot, and I think I can pretty much skirt by most major spoilers here. All you need to know is our lead has found out a bit more about the girl he's looking after, her family, the guy who gave him the job, and he has come to the conclusion that he is not quite safe in this freaky place. He's managed to get out of his chained harness at this point, and he's trying to get away from the girl, trying to hide from her in the house, and so he's like in the walls, he's creeping around the crawl space. Important thing to note about this crawl space, there is a dead woman's corpse in there. That in itself is not even really the scare here. We know there's a dead woman's corpse in the walls from earlier in the movie. We'll have one. It's when the corpse starts moving that we run into some severe nightmare fuel territory. It goes the way of When Evil Lurks and Terrified's gross reanimated corpse moments by never showing her move on camera. I think in probably the most terrifying instance of this. Our guy is trying to focus on soaring through the wall, getting himself out of the crawl space and freeing himself from this place, but he keeps getting distracted by the feeling there's something wrong with the corpse, and it seems almost like when he looks back at her, her head is just in the tiniest fraction of a different position. He puts his beanie over her head to try and like feel a little bit less watched, and I think the part that made all the hairs on the back of my neck raise the most is when he looks back and the beanie is adjusted so she's just got one eye peeking through the hole of it. Disgusting! So subtle but disgusting. She's got this huge toothy kind of grin or perhaps snarl on her face whenever we see her, which I feel is immediately quite striking, quite jarring. And she actually pops up a couple other times in random corners of the crawl space as the guy is venturing through, looking so uncanny and strange. I'm really glad that Damien McCarthy understood that this diva is at her scariest when we just get little flashes and glimpses of her for a second. It hits so hard that way. Say whatever you want about the rest of that film, I personally love it, but that part will always make my stomach drop. I will accept no slander. And so all of that leads me to the most terrifying, the most ingrained into my psyche scene, in the terror sense that is, and it comes from Kiyoshi Kurosawa's cyber ghost story masterpiece Pulse 2001, or Cairo. I feel like this is a pretty popular pick. Generally agreed that this movie is like 10 times more frightening than the average horror movie is. It's so unique, so heavy and hopeless. It's got this very ahead of its time plot surrounding ghosts doing their haunting via the internet, flooding people's computers with strange and disturbing images, mass suicides and disappearances occurring following people experiencing these online ghosts. It's got this one feature I'm obsessed with, where in the spot where a character dies, there'll be this big sooty black stain, a kind of physical manifestation of their soul leaving their body. So eerie when we see like a character entering like an empty room and just noticing one of these black stains on the wall or something. The scene I'm picking, I'm sure you will have seen. So what? As you should. It's a fucking banger. I am indeed talking about the slow moving ambling ghost woman sequence. We're following the character of Yabe in a dark, empty corridor and slowly seeing a female figure in a black dress appear just behind his back, pretty far away. Given so much time to just sit and try to decipher what we're seeing here, time to work ourselves up just like we do when staring at that one jacket on a chair in our dark bedroom or our reflection in the mirror for too long. Once it becomes a little bit clearer that this is indeed a woman in the background though, it gets no easier to comprehend, if you will. The way she moves is as if she's underwater or is desperately trying to do her best impression of a person walking. It's so bizarre and like nothing I've really ever seen before or since. It really is so simple but so bone-chilling. The otherworldliness of this ghost and the fact she's so slow and desperate as opposed to like zooming around while laughing evilly, like 2017 Pennywise or something. As Yabe becomes just as pit of stomach terrified as us, he hides behind a couch and we get another excruciatingly slow shot of the ghost woman's face peeking over the top to stare at him. Nothing scarier than some bitch peeking around things at you, as forever established by that one Reddit story, and Kurosawa just plays it to its fullest. Okay, so we are now onto the horror half of the horror versus terror dichotomy. So this is my top 10 genuinely disturbing moments in film scenes. There's going to be a good few non-horror movies on this list, but obviously the scenes themselves will be very distressing, very disturbing, very hard to watch. Sometimes a film being generally a little bit more chill and not intentionally horror can actually make those moments catch you off guard a lot more and kind of hit harder. So let's go, let's go, let's go. Starting off strong with a horror movie that has more than earned its place on every most disturbing ranking type situation, which is Kevin Smith's Tusk, also known as just the horrible walrus movie. I'm a lesbian, by the way, so it's an incredible segue. Tusk movie, also I'm a lesbian, so I came out to my parents. But I have such a weird little hetero crush on Justin Long, and unfortunately it did all start with this movie, question mark. Something about those tusks just speak to me, I suppose. I think it's just the respect I have for him taking on this like ridiculous and kind of embarrassing role. I'm just like, kudos, dude. Love you. It is of course about his character Wallace interviewing the wrong guy for his shitty podcast, Mr. Howard Howe, and ending up drugged and kidnapped by him. Howard Howe has an obsession with walruses after getting lost at sea during his sailor boyhood and living with one stranded on an island. Since then, he's been dabbling in DIY walrusification surgery, cutting off people's limbs and extracting bits of their bones and tendons and such, and then sewing them into this realistic walrus skin suit, forcing them to like then live as a walrus in it. So he can relive all those fond walrusy memories of his youth. As I would suggest, many nauseating scenes here. So much so that I was deathly afraid of this movie up until like only a few years ago. I've talked about it before on this channel, but I genuinely always thought it would be too much of an assault on my mind to ever even like deal with before. Of course, having watched it, there are actually like mostly a lot of comedic bits, not funny, not to be confused with funny, but certainly comical in tone, certainly trying to be funny. My most upsetting scene here though is definitely the finale, so spoilers abound. Basically, right at the end, Wallace's girlfriend and BFF, who have indeed been hooking up behind his walrus back, managed to rescue him from Howard Howe's Tusky lair, but they learn at this point that the walrus surgery he's undergone is irreversible. Not to mention the trauma he suffered from being like intensively conditioned into acting like a walrus. So even though he's technically saved, he will be a walrus forever. The film ends with the girlfriend and bestie visiting him in the zoo and coming to feed him a fish. We see Wallace still clearly a little bit in walrus mode because he snarfs down the fish, but also clearly still in touch with his humanity because tears run down his cheeks. And then that's paired with some flashbacks of when he was still human, with his girlfriend lecturing him about how he tries so hard to be so macho nowadays and she misses when he was more vulnerable and in touch with his emotions. It's just a truly haunting end to such a bizarre, gruesome little movie. The most depressing future possible lined up for our protagonist right in front of us. Still feeling and thinking mostly like a human while living in an enclosure as a walrus. We are overwhelmed with just how much death would have been so much kinder for him. Julia Ducournau's 2016 body horror movie Raw is a great pick for when you want to feel disgusting and regretful about what you've watched. Many of Ducournau's movies are, to be honest. This is a French movie about a vegetarian girl, Justine, who starts college and is bullied into eating meat as part of a hazing ritual. Only she discovers she likes the meat a little bit too much and she starts craving something even meatier. It awakens a hunger for cannibalism in her. This is such like an intimate take on cannibalism, if that makes sense. The horror doesn't necessarily lie in like, oh, this scary bitch goes around eating people, but it's so rooted in her transformation and like her horror over what is happening to her, her newfound urges. It's very hot and sticky and hazy. Lots of traumatizing scenes come from her transformation. The film setting up that something in her body chemistry is changing, like her horrific itchy rashes she develops all over her body one night. I also even just find the many scenes of hazing in this movie so tough as well. Like, this girl is so physically and emotionally uncomfortable throughout the runtime. She goes through so much humiliating and painful shit, like having to wear diapers to her classes and getting yanked out of her bed while she's trying to sleep and stuff. The disturbing scene I've gone for here is so simple, I almost feel silly for putting it in, but sometimes less is more. Part of Justine's sickly, inhuman transformation into a cannibal is that she throws up hair. That's literally it, she throws up hair. I will say it is an extortionate amount of hair though, and it's incredibly thick and tangled and wet. She'd been kind of nibbling at the ends of her hair as sort of like nervous habit before this. But what she pukes up is seriously about 4 heads worth. It's so relentless, it just keeps coming and coming. And within the greater context of Justine knowing something terrible is happening to her, but not specifically what, it becomes all the more troubling. The only thing I've seen that comes close in making me feel legitimately close to puking and just horrible inside is the tapeworm out through the mouth sequence in The Ugly Stepsister, awesome movie to come out this year, and it takes a lot of inspiration from Raw actually in several ways. But yeah, nobody does it quite like Raw. Nasty, nauseating little scene in a film that has plenty more where that came from. Spot 8 goes to Eraserhead, one of the most formative movies in my movie watching career. I saw it really young, thanks Dad, hey Dad. And I feel like it really opened up my brain in a huge way as to like what movies could be and what they could really make me feel, at risk of sounding pretentious as fuck. David Lynch's surreal industrial horror masterpiece mainly follows this one guy with sick hair, Henry, after he unwittingly gets his girlfriend pregnant and thus has to settle down with her. He has to be a father and a husband without feeling very prepared for that at all. However, this is David Lynch, as I said, so his baby is also a weird little fetal dinosaur looking thing that wails all day and night. His bae and her family are really fucking weird. His apartment is weird. It's weird. There's a tiny little lady in his radiator who sings to him in times of trouble. He has vivid dreams of his head blowing off and getting made into erasers. Get it? It's all a nightmare kind of take on the anxieties of fatherhood and taking responsibility. Like I said, masterpiece. The scene that sticks with me the most / neg comes when Henry goes to his girlfriend's family for dinner. Little does he know, about to find out she's pregnant and his whole situation is about to dramatically change. The whole family is acting very Lynchian indeed. For example, the grandma that doesn't speak or move ever, and the mum that seemingly really wants a slice of Henry. And things come to a head in the weird department when it's time to eat. They each have their own little mini chickens. It's kind of cute. Except they all have gaping chicken vagina holes. After Henry is asked to carve one of the chickens, said holes start gushing, like really gushing. Lots of bubbly discharge coming out of those bad boys, and their little legs start wiggling in time with the gush. And the mum in the background is reacting like she's orgasming. This is just so viscerally disgusting in a meaningful way too, obviously, considering all this film's got to say about birth and procreation and such. Paired with how anxious and uncomfortable and just desperate to get the fuck out of there we're already feeling on Henry's behalf. Watching him try to carve this horrible gooey little beast and knowing he's gonna have to eat it as well, it's just fucking horrible. A formative one for me, for sure. I think about it all the time. Harmony Korine's Gummo 1997 is not a horror movie in the traditional sense, but it is one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen. And once again, was way too young to watch this. I remember watching it on like my iPod Touch. It's a kind of mockumentary, but it's very strange, very experimental, about a little Ohio town that's been absolutely ravaged by a tornado. We follow all the townspeople still living there, and it's kind of a grotesque look at boredom, chronic boredom. All of these people are so bored and lonely and lazy in this desolate little place, and the random, often fucked up shit we watch them do as a result of that is just so oddly haunting. It feels so voyeuristic on our part, but we like can't look away. We've got characters hunting cats with rifles, tough and glue, fighting each other, fucking. We've got a guy who pimps out his sister with Down syndrome out to local boys. The scene that encapsulates that the most to me, and in general sums up what makes this movie so hard to watch, is the bathtub scene. It's very much just an inconsequential, random little vignette, as most of the most harrowing scenes in Gummo are. And it's of our kind of main character, a tween boy named Solomon, taking a bath. The most disgusting bath known to man, that is, although he seems to be enjoying it. We see him scrubbing himself with this tiny little bar of soap and his pruny fingers and too close for comfort detail, while sitting in this vat of just pure brown. I assume it's rust and like some of his body dirt, and it is repulsive. The walls are really dirty and moldy too, and we see him just like rubbing the soap up and down a spot of mold, gunky stuff on the wall for funsies at one point. To think of him putting that back on his body after that, ew! He's also blowing bubbles in the water and generally submerging his like mouth and half of his face in it. Things get all the more yucky when his mum comes in with a tray of treats for him. We watch him eat the sloppiest, most unappetizing bowl of spaghetti, a chocolate bar, and a glass of strawberry milk. I think housing a whole meal in any bath, like the cleanest in the world even, just feels unsanitary and odd to me. Imagine getting all clean, then like slopping spaghetti sauce all over yourself. The mum proceeds to lather the fuck out of his head in shampoo while he eats, adding more sensory unpleasantries to the equation, more liquids and goos. This scene is not only gross in the fact that like it's just gross, it's a kid in a dirty brown bathtub eating spaghetti and playing with mold, but also the wider kind of devastation it plays on. These squalid living conditions are very much representative of the filth this little kid is living in general. All the hatred and nastiness in this forgotten, poverty-stricken little community. Just not a fun, feel-good time at all. The Filippo Brothers' Talk to Me is still one of the best and one of the darkest supernatural horror films to come out in the last 10 years, which is saying something because there has been an absolute slew of them. It's about a group of teenagers who have in their possession a cursed, embalmed hand that allows a ghost to temporarily hop inside you and communicate when you hold it and say, "Talk to me." It also gives the user a bit of a high, a post-ghost buzz, if you will. So naturally, these teens have been using the hand as a party game. Lots of very disturbing scenes in this. It takes a pretty simple paranormal setup to some very, very dark places, namely through the character of Riley, who I'll get to in a minute. Runners up for most disturbing scene in this movie have got to be that one ghost who loves sucking toes, and honestly just the very simple human scene at the beginning where our lead character is trying to put a dying wallaby out of its misery on the road. Always hate to see animals in pain. The scene I've chosen, however, is the very impressive Riley possession sequence. Riley is one of the older teen character's little brother. He is very much an innocent in all of this. He wasn't even meant to be allowed to play with the hand, but he sneaks a little go on it when his sister is out of the room because he really wants to impress his little mate who's there with him. I think him and his mate are meant to be about 12 or 13. He is instantly very scared upon touching the hand, but again, he doesn't want to be a pussy, so he keeps going. It seems just like the other possession scenes we've seen up to this point at first. In fact, it seems much more tender and sweet because one of the characters, Mia's late mother, seems to possess him, and she uses his body to tell her she loves her and such. But then it all becomes quite sinister. Well, that's an understatement. He quite literally starts bashing his head in against the table, and it's the most jarringly visceral portrayal of that. Definitely added to times 10 because he's a kid, and a kid we've gotten to know as such a sweet and earnest little guy before all of this. He sticks his fingers into his eye socket and starts pulling his eye out, literally plucking it out. You can see it starting to come loose and like bulge out into his hand until the other characters frantically intervene. His chair flings itself across the room so he can find a new surface to repeatedly mash his skull against. And his sister tries to put her hand in front of the table, but he just smashes on top of her hand and breaks that too. I think this scene is just such an assault on the viewer. It is so overwhelmingly cruel and painful. I remember just being speechless in the cinema. And things do not get much better for little Riley throughout the rest of this film. He even has more head smacking specifically lined up, this time on a tile floor, licking up his own blood. Yikes. Yikes. Spot 5, let's go top 5. This one's probably kind of weird to be this low down on the disturbing list, but it's my list, it's my piece being disturbed here. I'm talking about Ari Aster's Hereditary. Everyone and everyone's mother saw this and was frightened by it. Well, no, because this movie is super successful. It's also super contentious. People are very divided on whether it's terrifying or just kind of nothing burger. But I am very much team terrifying. It taps into all my scares, really. It could have easily been on the spooky top 10 as well, especially all the understated people just standing in the background type ghost portrayals. No film has done it better since, in my books. The part of this movie that really disturbs me, really feels like a punch in the face, is when the character of Charlie dies. Peter and Charlie are brother and sister, 16 and 13 years old respectively. Average 16-year-old right here. There's a scene where Peter's manipulated by his mum into bringing Charlie with him to a rockin' teen house party, and then swiftly has to leave again after Charlie eats some like nut cookies or nut cake type thing. She eats something with nuts in, and she is deathly allergic and EpiPenless. So Peter, who has also gotten good and stoned by this point, has to rush her to a hospital pronto. Because she's going into anaphylactic shock, which makes it extremely hard to breathe, Charlie starts rolling the window down and sticking her head out to gasp for air. Peter's already driving erratically, and he ends up doing a huge swerve when he comes across a deer in the road, whacking the car and subsequently Charlie's head into a telephone pole, which indeed decapitates her. This situation alone is horrific. A 13-year-old girl dying in such a traumatic and painful way this early into the film. Objectively horrific. But what I think elevates it to just like burned into brain level of disturbing is Alex Wolff's performance as Peter, his reaction to this development, which is just complete and total dissociation. The best portrayal of it I think I've ever seen. He just cannot comprehend it whatsoever, and it's like someone has just pulled his plug. The camera stays with him for minutes, just staring ahead in the same blank expression, barely breathing. Very David Lynch coded. Even once his total bodily freeze up passes and he's able to move again, he's still clearly like mentally a million miles away. And he just starts driving home as normal, climbing into bed without saying a word to his parents or raising any alarm or anything. We stay watching his expression all through the night and even the morning when we hear his and Charlie's mum finding Charlie's headless body in the car outside and just screaming herself raw. We get so desensitized to like grisly deaths and grief and stuff in horror movies, but this film just packs a really horrifically realistic punch. I truly feel like I am actually watching this happen to a person in a way I very rarely feel when, you know, as an avid horror watcher, as a horror hound. Keeping these Ari Aster vibes going with another one of his films in spot 4, Midsommar. His iconic Swedish cult tragedy horror. This movie is just as divisive as Hereditary, and while I still love the film, this one is actually my least favorite of Ari Aster's whole discography, filmography. He's not releasing sick beats. And yes, that means this is below Beau is Afraid for me. It's just not my fave. It does, however, have many exquisitely disturbing moments because this director just has a knack for that. Could have picked any one of the deaths in it because we've got like skin flaying, skin mask wearing, hammer to the head smashing, paralyzed while burning aliving. I could have even picked the sex scene in this, which is, being a cult film, it's very ritualistic and orgy-esque, very strange viewing. The plot itself is disturbing. It's about a bunch of American college students holidaying in Sweden and staying with the Haga commune there, slowly learning what they've got themselves into and just how helpless they are, thousands of miles from home and immersed in a culture they don't understand. The scene I've chosen, however, comes right at the start and has absolutely nothing to do with any of that. It's pretty much just backstory for our our kind of lead character Danny, one of the aforementioned college kids. She has a sister who still lives with their parents back at home, and who struggles very seriously with mental health issues, often emailing and calling Danny from home for help with all of that. And we're introduced to Danny while she's navigating one of her sister's bad spells over email. She's very stressed about it, expressing that this time just feels different. The messages her sister sent are all to the effect of everything's gone dark, and seemingly expressing outright plans to kill herself. No matter how much Danny tries to calm herself about this though, that is indeed the case. We are shown in this slow, dark, gloomy blue pan of Danny's family home that the sister is dead with a car exhaust hose in her mouth, carbon monoxide poisoning herself and her parents in the process, who we also see laying dead in bed. I think the hose in the mouth image is a very striking one that really took me aback. But similarly to Hereditary, what drives it all home is Danny's reaction. If you've seen Florence Pugh act in anything, you'll know she has a great wail on her. She can really scream and cry. And her performance here is a shining example of that. Her cries upon finding out her entire family just went in one murder-suicide swoop are absolutely agonized and so drawn out. We are sat uncomfortably watching her shriek her heart out, top of her lungs for so long. It's so haunting, and honestly I think I've skipped it before because it comes right at the start of the movie, so I think I've like started my movie purposefully after that before, which is saying something because the rest of the movie is anything but feel good. It perfectly sets the tone for the absolute rock bottom loneliness and the sense of Danny's life being over, just being empty from now on, that really pervades the rest of the film. Top 3 is cracking off with Kay Kassa's blacker than black comedy, The Coffee Table. I've been dying to talk about this properly ever since I watched it. This film is the epitome of anxiety horror. All of its menace is kind of rooted in everyday problems that pile up and up and up and up and stress you out more and more. I say kind of everyday things because these characters' luck is cartoonishly bad. I mean, there's nothing supernatural, nothing outright horrific pulling the plot forward. It is horrific, but it's bad luck and bad decisions. These things could feasibly happen to a person. It has new father Jesus trip and drop his newborn baby on a poorly assembled glass coffee table, off of which the glass sheet surface goes sliding and decapitates said baby. From here on, Jesus makes worse and worse decisions on how to proceed, going into dissociation and avoidance mode and deciding not to call 999 or even tell his wife, the baby's mother. The day becomes a long, relentless torture session of him trying to hide the fact his baby is dead and headless while interacting with his wife and their guests coming around later that day. Absolute tummy ache inducing stuff. I was shouting at my screen while watching this. I was man yells at cloud while watching this. Once again, the scene I'm talking about here is the final scene, the spoileriest, because it is the culmination of everything going on here. It takes place in one day. This is the end of the day, and it's when the cat comes out of the bag. Something to note, one of his neighbors is a little girl who has a crush on him that we meet earlier in the film, and she's convinced he is one day gonna leave his wife for her. This ending sequence begins with her knocking at his door and trying to tell this to Jesus's wife Maria. Obviously, although Maria hasn't known about the decapitation situation, she has been able to see that Jesus has been incredibly tense and distracted all day, and for one horrible minute we think that she's gonna believe that it's because he really has been having an affair with this child. Immediately uncomfortable, terrible vibes. The main trouble begins though with the little girl's dog, who runs into Jesus and Maria's apartment and starts sniffing around. Jesus had been so completely unwilling to acknowledge the fact of his son's death at all that he hadn't even touched the baby's head, which is still laying discarded under the couch, until this dog finds it and starts playing with it. Just a genuine snapshot into hell. This happy little dog pulling out the bloody infant head and chewing on it, playing with it. The couple's guests, Jesus's brother and his new girlfriend, see what it is. The girlfriend immediately throws up. The brother is frantically trying to get Maria out of the room so she doesn't have to see it. But Maria does indeed see it, and so instantly, exquisitely horrifying to her that she jumps straight out of the window. Just the mother of all stress dreams. It's like something out of a Shakespearean tragedy. Carnage of both the emotional and physical kind. Spot number 2 is once again not a traditional horror movie. Nothing from here on actually is. Maybe because I am so familiar with the horror movie conventions, these moments of revulsion and trauma where I'm not fully expecting them, or, you know, where it's not in a way that I'm expecting, affect me a lot more. Zero Day 2003 is a found footage movie that is heavily inspired by the 1999 Columbine massacre, one of the most infamous school shootings to ever occur in the USA. It's set up as like a collection of vlogs, if you will. It's videotapes taken by Andre and Cal, 2 high schoolers planning a shooting. The shooting itself is only a very small portion of this movie. It's really just about letting, or I suppose making us fly on the wall throughout all their meticulous planning. Them getting their guns and practicing, their method for deciding the date, which it's going to be the first day that's 0 degrees, hence why it's called Zero Day. Them burning all their CDs and video games and stuff, so nobody can blame their actions on those after it's all done. The whole thing is unbelievably uncomfortable. It's very successful in doing what it does, which is giving you this in-depth insider look at these monstrous school shooters, but like never inviting us to overly empathize with them. They're not cartoonish villains, you know, they are kids at the end of the day, but their coldness and their clear budding superiority complexes are so prominent and well acted.
Life isn't fair, so we gotta even the score a little.
The scene in question is around 10 minutes long, and it is the shooting itself. It is the only part of the movie that isn't through the boys' eyes. It's through the school's CCTV and with a backing track of a 911 call. One of the students calls 911 and then is instantly killed. So the operator, still on the line, is using it to try and speak to the boys and talk them down. Namely, she's repeating, "Andre, pick up," and "Pick up the phone, Andre." The CCTV style format really makes you feel like you're watching something real, and it is unflinching and brutal. Not in the way that you see loads of gore or really see much of anything in good detail, but the way the camera just runs through it all as the boys check under every table and chair and just take out every innocent kid they find like it's nothing. It truly feels like it goes on forever. And they're swaggering around the whole time, so pleased with themselves and clearly not giving a fuck about the consequences. And they actually never suffer any consequences, because the scene only ends when the 2 of them finish up by shooting themselves, satisfied with having completed their mission. And they have this menial little squabble over how to do their countdown to killing themselves right at the end, like whether to go on the count of 3 or after 3. And it just really hits home after all that they are just arrogant teenage boys, and it feels so bizarre and terrifying that they were capable of all that shit, as, you know, it always does when this stuff happens in real life. I really can't stress how disturbing this is without you seeing it, man. And the full film is currently on YouTube if you're in the mood for a bad time. My final example is not a horror movie at all, but it is one of my favorite films in the whole world, and it's from one of my favorite directors in the whole world. Mysterious Skin, 2004. It's one of those that just came into my life at exactly the right time and kind of blew me wide open, for better or for worse. It's a movie about 2 boys that were molested by the same guy as children, and they're parallel but completely different reactions to that growing up. One boy, Neil, becoming a sex worker at like 15, I believe, and being sexually reckless his entire adolescence, even through the AIDS crisis. He remembers the incidents of his childhood perfectly, and in a fucked up, bitter way kind of views it as his gay awakening. The other boy, Brian, cannot remember a thing apart from having memory gaps when he was little, random nosebleeds and bedwetting, and so we watch him pursue the theory that he was abducted by aliens. As you can see, unbelievably sensitive subject matter. A lot of people say it goes too far for them to, you know, be able to enjoy this, be able to watch this, which I totally respect. This shit touches people in very different ways. I personally think it is handled perfectly. It never just feels like trauma porn to me. It feels delved into very meaningfully, while never shying away from, you know, the ugliness and the havoc this stuff wreaks on kids' lives. And that makes it more disturbing, in my opinion. It allows those themes to actually really pop out and hit home as they would in life, as opposed to like I'm just distracted the whole time by the way it was thrown in for shock value. It feels much more real. The scene I want to rank is probably as too far as it actually goes. And don't worry, there isn't any actual like intercourse per se in this, but it does get uncomfortably close. It's the flashback sequence in which Neil narrates to us exactly what happened to him as a child, when he used to be his little league coach's favorite on the team and get to go back to his house. It's portrayed in a way that really deftly handles both how magical and whimsical it seemed through poor manipulated little Neil's eyes and how seedy and vile it was in actuality. The coach orders him pizza and plays video games with him, offers him an array of different delicious brightly coloured cereal and lets him be silly and throw it all around. Only then we cut to the coach leaning in from Neil's POV, moving his face closer and closer like he's gonna kiss him. Then we see him resting his head on Neil's stomach. Any magical, whimsical vibes cut dead here. And then through more POV shots, we see the coach is mounting him, shushing him and telling him it's gonna feel good. Afterwards, we see this just completely dissociated expression on Neil's face, clearly irrevocably wiped in some way, and it's so heartbreaking on this little kid. There's other similar scenes in the movie. For example, we get flashbacks of what happened between Brian and the coach, scenes exploring Coxa, that's child-on-child sexual assault, lots of tough sequences showing Neil's reckless hookups, from men who violently attack him to an AIDS sufferer who just wants to be touched while he cries. Yeah, incredible film, and easily the most disturbed I've ever been by a piece of art in my life. Top spot all the way. And so there are your 20 disturbing scenes, or really my 20 disturbing scenes, because the art that disturbs you, it's always subjective. There really is very little objectivity to it. Although I do hope you agree with me on some of these. Tell me your own thoughts as well, what you would add in that I didn't, where your ranking numbers would differ and stuff. If any of the stuff that freaks me out is actually just for big old wimps, I love to hear your thoughts. It's very cool, and it's why I make these videos, so sound off. And as ever, let me know what you've been reading, what you've been watching. I just finished reading 11/22/63 by Stephen King, which was amazing. I loved it so much, especially the dairy chapters, which have actually now prompted me to start on an It reread. I'm now rereading It again, so my entire TBR is going to be on pause for like 1,000 years now, and that is my third reread. So I'm going to be the resident It scholar by the end of this. For stuff I've been watching, I recently saw, finally, Peter Jackson's Meet the Feebles. It's kind of like the evil Muppets. Had lots and lots of fun with that. It was very deranged. 4 stars for me. Bye!